I stopped trying to win his love and let my sister take over, and now he deeply regrets it. The celebratory candles burned brightly, and a soft pop from the wick shattered the stillness of the night. I sat upright on the brocaded couch, my gaze fixed on the pair of interlocking wine cups on the rosewood table. This was the Duan residence. It had been only a little over a month since I had married into the family. In my previous life, on this very night, Duan Jingzhan had, right in front of me, personally poured a cup of wine for Ning Jiajiami's so-called cousin, but in reality the woman he truly loved and promised to bring her into the household. That familiar, gnawing pain in my chest still seemed to linger, the lingering echo of despair before death. I slowly clenched the sleeve of my shirt, embroidered with mimosa flowers, digging my fingertips into the palm of my hand. That sharp sting brought me fully back to my senses. I was back. Footsteps sounded from outside the door, steady and familiar. Duan Jingzhan pushed the door open and walked in, carrying a faint scent of alcohol. The moment he saw me, a hint of warmth flickered in his eyes, which usually seemed so cold. He strode toward me, his voice as gentle as ever. "Yun Shu, why aren't you asleep at this late hour? You've only just started to feel better. Didn't catch a chill." In the past, hearing such thoughtful and considerate words would have brought tears to my eyes, and I would have felt all my grievances melt away. But now, listening to him say this, I only feel a chill creeping up my spine. If he truly cared about me, how could he not know how cold it is in this room? He's simply counting on the fact that I'm a soft-hearted person who can't stand even the slightest sign of kindness from him. "My husband, I have something to tell you." I stood up, dodged his outstretched hand, and walked over to the table with a calm expression. Pouring 2 cups of tea, Duan Jingzhan furrowed his brow slightly, clearly not expecting me to be so cold. He withdrew his hand, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and a playful smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Oh, it's the middle of the night. What does the lady wish to say? I've heard that you've been spending a great deal of time with my younger sister, Yun Yao, lately." I looked up, my gaze clear and free of any hint of jealousy. As if I were discussing a trivial matter. "My sister has been spoiled since childhood, so it's only natural that she's a bit headstrong. If you truly care for her, you might as well give her a proper status. That would be better than this entanglement without any official recognition, which only gives people something to gossip about." Duan Jingzhan's expression froze instantly. He stared at me intently, as if trying to discern whether I was being sincere. He had never seen me act so gracious before. In the past, even when I exchanged a few words with others on his behalf, I would secretly weep for a long time afterward. "Yun Shu, what do you mean by that?" He lowered his voice, a hint of wariness flashing in his eyes. "She's just a distant cousin from the estate. We happened to run into each other and exchanged a few casual words. Didn't let your imagination run wild." I chuckled softly, stood up, and walked over to him. I smoothed out the slightly rumpled front of his robe. My movements were extremely gentle, yet my tone was so calm it bordered on cruelty. "My husband, there's no need to hide it. Yun Yao is also a member of the Pei family. If she can serve you well, it will be a blessing for our family as well. Since you are unwilling to broach the subject, I shall report this to my mother-in-law tomorrow and arrange for Yun Yao to join our household." A flicker of surprise crossed Duan Jingzhan's eyes, which quickly gave way to a deep, probing gaze. He was probably wondering what had triggered my reaction or whether I was setting some kind of trap. He had always been suspicious, especially when it came to matters involving the peace and tranquility of the inner quarters. "You really don't mind?" he asked in return, his voice tinged with hesitation. "I am frail and find it difficult to manage the household's daily affairs." I looked up to meet his gaze, speaking sincerely. "My younger sister is young and full of energy. She's just the person to help lighten my load." As I watched a hint of bewilderment and inexplicable excitement gradually surface on his face, I sneered inwardly. Wasn't this sensibility exactly what he wanted? In my previous life, just to prove a point and for the sake of that so-called love that lasts a lifetime, I sacrificed the entire Pei family. In this life, I'm determined to give him exactly what he wants, planting this thorn with my own hands right into the heart of his so-called carefully calculated inner household. When his bottomless eyes locked onto mine, I knew I'd taken that first step successfully. Early the next morning, before the dawn glow had completely faded, the air at the Duan residence was crisp and cool. I got up early and carefully applied my makeup in front of the bronze mirror. Though the woman in the mirror still looked somewhat pale, the melancholy that had once clouded her eyes was gone. When Pei Yunyao pushed open the door and stepped inside, her stride was light and brisk, her eyes sparkling with unmistakable hope and ambition. 2 years my junior. She had grown up in the Pei household since childhood. She was always quick-witted and exceptionally skilled at reading people's expressions and intentions. Sister, I heard that last night. You spoke with my husband. She stood behind me, took the ivory comb from the maid's hand, and gently began to comb my hair, though she couldn't quite hide the excitement in her voice. I looked at her through the mirror, the corners of my mouth curving slightly. Yunyao, in this mansion, you are the one I trust the most. There are some things I won't keep from you. I turned around, took her hand, and gently slipped the key to the treasury which I had prepared in advance into her palm. The icy touch made Pei Yunyao's fingers tremble violently. She instinctively tried to pull her hand away, but I held it firmly in place. What do you mean, sister? A flash of alarm crossed her eyes, but mostly it was disbelief. My husband's heart, after all, does not adhere to the rules. I let out a long sigh, my expression tinged with just the right amount of despondency. You've seen my frail constitution for yourself. I simply don't have the strength to handle these household trifles and the intricate web of social obligations within the mansion. Rather than letting those restless, scheming women from outside come in and chip away at the Duan family's power, it would be better if you took over. Pei Yunyao's breathing quickened. She knew better than anyone what the position of house manager meant in this grand mansion. It was the key to controlling wealth, connections, and holding one's head high within this household. She had always wanted to climb the social ladder, but because of her status, she could only ever hover on the periphery. But this is still against propriety. She lowered her eyes, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help but turn up. Etiquette. I smiled contemptuously. In this household, my husband's affection is the greatest form of etiquette. As long as you've captured his heart, what need is there for any official status? Should anything happen to me in the future, who else but you could take my place as the legitimate wife? Those words hit her like a sledgehammer, shattering the last remnants of hesitation in her heart. She looked up at me suddenly, her gaze shifting from its initial hesitation to one of intense greed. She had always thought I was weak and easy to take advantage of, believing I had no idea about the secret affair she was having with Duan Jingzhan behind my back. Sister, don't worry, I'll definitely help ease your burden. She clutched the keys tightly, her voice tinged with a sense of determination that left no room for retreat. I got up, walked over to the window, and looked at the willow tree in the courtyard, which was just beginning to sprout. I said softly, my husband is coming home early from court today. Why don't you prepare some of his favorite pastries and take them to his study yourself? There are some things he can't say himself, you can say them for him. After seeing off Pei Yunyao, I sat in my room, listening to the sound of hurried footsteps coming from the courtyard. The maidservant Qinghe entered, looking somewhat worried. She poured me a cup of hot tea and whispered, Miss, are you really going to hand over the duties of house manager to the second young lady? What if the old lady holds it against you? I'll handle things with mother myself. I took a sip of tea. It was just the right temperature, neither too hot nor too cold. Qinghe, you must remember, when people strive to climb higher, they tend to overlook the abyss at their feet. Yunyao wants to fly, so I'll give her the most magnificent pair of wings. But whether those wings can carry her well, that depends on her own destiny. That afternoon, Duan Jingzhan did indeed come to my courtyard. Today he was wearing a black brocade robe, which made him look even more dashing, though his eyes lacked their usual warmth and instead held a hint of scrutiny. Did you really give her the key? He sat across from me, his gaze fixed on my face, as if trying to find the slightest hint of a slip-up in my expression. Doesn't my husband also want peace and harmony in the inner quarters? I poured him a cup of tea with practiced ease, just as I had done countless times before. although Yun Yao is young. She's quick-witted. If she can please you, what reason would I, as your wife, have to stand in her way? Duan Jingzhan was silent for a moment, then let out a soft chuckle. He reached out, gently cupped my chin, and forced me to look up at him. Yun Shu, you've changed. You used to argue with me for 3 whole days over something this trivial. Why are you being so magnanimous today? I didn't look away. I let him scrutinize me, my gaze as clear as water. Because I'm tired. Between you and me, it seems there's nothing left except that sense of duty we share as husband and wife. Why should I put myself and my younger sister through such hardship for someone who doesn't love me? Those words were half true and half false. Yet they stung the most. Duan Jingzhan's fingers stiffened slightly. He apparently hadn't expected me to put it so bluntly. His overbearing arrogance made him loathe being seen through by me, and he loathed my impassive demeanor even more. You're quite level-headed, he said, letting go of her hand and picking up his teacup, though he didn't take a sip. Since you're so magnanimous, from now on, leave the household affairs to Yun Yao. You just need to focus on recovering. Don't worry about anything else. As he stood up and walked away, his back seemed particularly resolute. I watched him go, yet my heart remained calm. He thought he was in control of everything, that he was playing both sides to his advantage, but he didn't realize he was stepping, one step at a time, into the web I had woven with my own hands. That evening, a commotion broke out in the inner courtyard of the Duan residence. In an effort to assert her status, Pei Yunyao publicly reprimanded a long-serving matron simply because the matron had asked one extra question about the origin of the account. The commotion was so loud that nearly half the people in the mansion heard it. I lay on the couch, listening to the commotion outside, while Qinghe grumbled indignantly beside me. The second young lady is far too arrogant. It's only the first day, and she's already struck the old lady's confidant. The more arrogant she is, the better. I closed my eyes, a cold smile curving my lips. The more arrogant she is, the more people she'll offend. In this household, a man's favor alone isn't enough. Without the unanimous support of everyone, from top to bottom, how long do you think she'll be able to hold on to her position? Duan Jingzhan was a man who placed great importance on his reputation. What he needed was a gentle and virtuous wifey, a capable partner who could manage his household affairs. Pei Yun Yao, however, was precisely the kind of person who lacked self-control and was most likely to ruin everything. When this affection turned into a burden, and when his household descended into chaos because of Pei Yun Yao, what was his so-called deep affection really worth? The night breeze blew through the window lattice, causing the books on the desk to flutter. I sighed softly. This game of chess had only just begun. Tomorrow, even more excitement awaited them. Pei Yunyao's arrogance came much faster and more intensely than I had anticipated. After she took power that day, she seemed like a completely different person. Not only did she dismiss the capable maids who had once served in my courtyard, but she also tampered extensively with the estate's accounts, eager to demonstrate her household management skills to Duan Jingzhan. She had no understanding whatsoever of the complex accounting system of the vast Duan clan. She withheld many monthly allowances that should have been distributed on time under various trumped-up pretexts, and even dared to embezzle funds intended for the Duan family's elderly elders. In less than 3 days, undercurrents had already begun to stir within the inner quarters of the Duan mansion. Sitting in the pavilion in the backyard, I listened to the faint sounds of an argument drifting from afar, a bowl of lotus seed soup known for its heat-clearing properties in my hands, my demeanor calm and composed. Young lady. The old lady summoned the second young lady to the main hall again today. I hear she looked absolutely dreadful. Qinghe walked over, her tone betraying a hint of unhidden glee. Let them fight it out. I took a small sip of the soup. A faint bitterness filled my taste buds. The Duan family has so many rules, and the matriarch values her reputation above all else. For Yun Yao to make such a big spectacle of this is practically like poking a stick down the matriarch's throat. Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps approached, and Pei Yun Yao, clutching the hem of her skirt and her face flushed with anger, stormed into my courtyard. Her usual feigned demureness had completely vanished. replaced by a menacing aura that shone through her luxurious silk robes. Sister, how are the people in your household raised? How dare they gossip about me behind the old lady's back? As soon as she walked in, she pointed her finger at my nose and shouted at me, with that sharp, caustic demeanor. She truly lacked any of the grace expected of a young lady from a distinguished family. I set down the porcelain bowl and slowly stood up, unfazed by her haughty demeanor. My gaze was calm, as if I were looking at a mere clown. What's gotten into you, little sister? My people have always followed the rules. How could they possibly go to the old lady and tattle on you for no reason? That business with the accounts. I clearly did everything exactly as you instructed. So how come, when the old lady talks about it, it sounds like I'm lining my own pockets? She gritted her teeth, her normally delicate features slightly contorted with jealousy and resentment. You did this on purpose, didn't you? I smiled gently, walked slowly toward her, and spoke in a voice as soft as the breeze. Little sister, every single entry in this household's ledgers is reviewed by the stewards of each branch of the family. If there's a discrepancy in the accounts, it's the steward's fault. If you can't even handle such a minor matter properly, how can you ever expect your husband to hold you in high regard? I left her at a loss for words, her face flushing red and then turning pale. Besides, I whispered, leaning close to her ear, my tone tinged with a strange, seductive allure. What your husband loves most about you is your straightforwardness and innocence. If you come across as too shrewd, he'll only find you inscrutable and grow wary. All you need to do is tell him that this is all for his own good to help the household save money, and he'll naturally take your side. She froze, her eyes flickering with suspicion and greed. She craved Duan Jingzhan's approval so desperately that she failed to grasp the deeper meaning behind even such an obvious attempt to sow discord. She thought I was teaching her how to win a man's favor. But little did she know that I was leading her down a path to ruin. You mean? Really? Her voice wavered. I'm your older sister. Would I ever do anything to hurt you? I gently patted her shoulder with a loving gesture. Go on. If your husband asks, just tell him that you did it with the best of intentions, and that you'd gladly accept any hardship. After Pei Yunyao left, Qinghe looked at me with concern. Miss, the second young lady is still young. After all, if she really plays the victim in front of her husband. What if? What if what? I gazed in the direction she had gone, my eyes far-reaching. What if she really did win Duan Jingzhan over? Don't worry. A man like Duan Jingzhan craves power and the facade of tenderness. But the moment that tenderness reveals the ugly truth of scheming and greed, he'll despise it more than anyone else. Besides, given Pei Yunyao's temperament, she simply can't keep a secret. Sure enough, that night, a sound like something heavy hitting the floor came from the direction of the study. Although we were separated by several courtyards, I knew that Duan Jingzhan was furious. Pei Yunyao's so-called frugality had actually targeted the expenses he typically incurred while entertaining influential figures, and she had even left traces of her misdeeds in several important official accounts, causing Duan Jingzhan to lose face in front of his colleagues. For someone who places immense importance on his political career, this kind of favor is nothing short of fatal. Half an hour later, Duan Jingzhan walked into my bedroom with a grim expression. He didn't look at me, but sat down directly on a chair in the outer room, radiating a heavy chill. You've got some nerve, he said coldly, his voice laced with a hint of grinding hatred. Spoiling her until she's out of control, is that what you call virtue? He slowly and deliberately slipped on an outer robe and stepped out of the inner chamber. In the lamplight, his handsome face looked somewhat grim. I didn't rush to defend myself, but instead walked up behind him and gently massaged his stiff shoulders. My husband. I've never meddled in the household's affairs, but I do know that Yinyao sincerely wants to help lighten your burden. My voice was calm, tinged with a touch of innocence. If she's done something wrong, you can simply correct her. Why let it upset you so much that it harms your health? Advice. What on earth is going through her head? Duan Jingzhan brushed my hand aside, stood up abruptly, and glared at me with irritation. Today, in front of several of my colleagues, she actually dared to question my expenses on socializing. She's brought utter disgrace upon the Duan family. I sneered to myself. This was Duan Jingzhan. He had never regarded Pei Yunyao as a true partner. In his eyes, she was merely an accessory. An object meant to adorn his empty inner quarters. The moment this object brought shame upon him, he would discard her without a second thought. As if she were a worn-out shoe. My lord, perhaps she just cares too much about you. I lowered my head to hide the mockery in my eyes. I, too, have endured my share of hardships in this household, but for your sake, I have put up with it all. Those words were like pouring oil on a fire, yet they also felt like a knife piercing straight to the heart. As he looked at me, resigned to my fate. Yet with a faint hint of helplessness, a barely perceptible flicker of regret crossed his eyes. Yun Shu. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end, nothing came out. He's still the same selfish person. He doesn't regret how he treated me in the past, but rather that he chose the wrong pawn to balance the various factions within the inner quarters. My lord, you should get some rest early, I said, turning toward the bed in a calm tone. You have many official matters to attend to tomorrow. Don't let the trivial matters of the inner quarters drain your energy and spirit. He stood there, watching my resolute back, the complex expression in his eyes growing ever more intense. Perhaps he was still weighing who, in this household, was truly the most sensible woman. But I knew that Pei Yunshu, the woman who had loved him deeply and without regret, had already died completely in the bitter winter of my past life. Pei Yunyao's madness will be the first price he pays for his own actions. The mood in the household quietly shifted. Following that night's argument in the study, Duan Jingzhan began to frequently avoid Pei Yunyao, even using his heavy workload as an excuse to stay up all night in his study. At first, Pei Yunyao tried to win him over with all sorts of exquisite pastries and soups. But all she usually got in return was Duan Jingzhan's indifferent back and that icy get out. The panic of falling from the clouds completely threw Pei Yunyao off balance. She took out all her frustration on the servants in the mansion, frequently forcing them to kneel as punishment and even beating and berating them at will, causing widespread fear and anxiety throughout the Duan mansion. And I became her last hope. Sister, please help me. When she appeared in my room once again, her eyes were red-rimmed and her hair was slightly disheveled. She had lost all traces of the spoiled arrogance she displayed when she first arrived at the mansion. He hasn't set foot in my courtyard for half a month. No matter how much I beg, he refuses to see me. Is it you? Did you say something to him? I set down my needle and thread and watched her quietly. At that moment, Pei Yunyao looked exactly like the version of myself from my previous life. Struggling in despair, except that her eyes were filled with a longing for power and influence, rather than love. Yunyao, why do you always think I'm the one pulling the strings behind the scenes? I stood up and walked over to her, my tone tinged with a hint of exasperation and disappointment. You know better than anyone what kind of man your husband is. He loves a gentle, virtuous wife who doesn't cause him any trouble. Just look at what you've been doing lately. Hasn't every single thing been a test of his patience? But everything I've done has been for the good of this household. For his sake, she argued, almost hysterically. But he doesn't see it that way. I shook my head, a dark gleam flashing in my eyes. If you want to win him back, there's only one way. What road? She looked up suddenly and grabbed my sleeve urgently, her fingernails digging into my skin so hard it hurt. I leaned down and whispered in her ear. The day after tomorrow is the flower viewing banquet for the noble ladies of the capital, and the women of every family will be in attendance. All you need to do at the banquet is apologize to everyone in front of the crowd. Admit that you handled things improperly before, and immediately return this authority over the household to its rightful owner, that is, to me. My husband values his reputation above all else. If you act so sensibly, he will surely look upon you with new respect. A flicker of hesitation crossed Pei Yunyao's eyes. She clearly didn't want to give up her position as housekeeper. But seeing the sincerity in my eyes and remembering the cold shoulder she'd been getting from Duan Jingzhan these past few days, she finally gritted her teeth and nodded. All right, I'll do as you say. Sister. I watched her walk away, a hint of coldness flickering at the corner of my eye. The flower viewing banquet was a gathering of the capital's elite. If she were to lose face in front of everyone, it wouldn't just be her problem, it would be a disgrace to the Duan family. and even more so to Duan Jingzhan. Duan Jingzhan, a man who cares so much about his reputation, would never tolerate his woman bringing shame upon him in public. For the next 2 days, the mansion was unusually quiet. I didn't interfere with anything. I simply waited quietly for the flower viewing banquet to begin. On the day of the banquet, the weather was perfect, with gentle sunshine. The ladies from various mansions in the capital, dressed in their finest, gathered in the rear garden of the Marquis's residence, accompanied by Pei Yunyao. I walked into the garden amid a sea of envious glances. Pei Yunyao had taken great care with her appearance that day and looked exceptionally radiant, though a shadow of gloom lingered over her brow. "Sis, did you really have to say that right now?" After we sat down, she tugged nervously at the hem of my skirt. "If you miss this opportunity today, you may never have another chance to restore your reputation in your husband's eyes," I said gently, trying to reassure her. "Remember, the more humble you are today, the more important you'll be to your husband in the future." She took a deep breath, as if she had made up her mind. Halfway through the banquet, just as the atmosphere was reaching its peak, I gave her a gentle nudge. Pei Yunyao stood up and, amid the astonished stares of the guests, walked to the center of the garden. She glanced around somewhat nervously, and her gaze finally settled on several matriarchs who were also attending the banquet not far away. "Today, on the occasion of Lady Ho's banquet, there are a few words I'd like to say." Her voice trembled slightly, but she did her best to remain composed. "In the past, due to my youthful impetuosity, I mismanaged the household affairs, causing some turmoil within the estate and making a spectacle of myself before all of you. Ladies, today, I would like to offer my sincere apologies to everyone, and I hereby publicly return the authority to manage the household to my elder sister." The garden fell silent in an instant, and countless gazes converged on her. Some were mocking, some sympathetic, but most were scrutinizing. Everyone was there to make fun of the Duan family. After all, rumors of favoring a concubine at the expense of one's wife had long been rife. Now that this concubine had behaved in such a manner in full view of everyone, how could the Duan family possibly save face? Pei Yunyao clearly hadn't expected the atmosphere to be so cold. She had thought she would earn a few compliments calling her dutiful, but instead she was met with such an icy silence. Just then, a familiar voice came from outside the garden. "What are you up to here?" I looked up and saw Duan Jingzhan walk into the garden with a grim expression. He had obviously been summoned. He must have heard some rumors, and his face was as dark as could be. Jingzhan Pei Yunyao looked as if she had seen a savior and hurried to greet him. "Shut up!" Duan Jingzhan snapped, his gaze as sharp as a blade, piercing straight through Pei Yunyao. "Who told you to come here? Who told you to go around spouting this nonsense?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a bone-chilling coldness. The noble women around him turned their heads one after another, whispering among themselves, their eyes fixed on him as if he were a disgraceful object. Pei Yunyao's face turned pale. Seeing the look of disgust on Duan Jingzhan's face, she was completely stunned. What she had originally thought was an act of generosity had now become the greatest humiliation she could inflict on him. She stammered, her lips trembling, as she tried to explain. "Go back." Duan Jingzhan didn't give her a chance to explain. He turned to look at me, and the gloom in his eyes instantly gave way to a hint of insincere apology. "Yun Shu, I'm sorry to have burdened you with these household matters. Let's discuss this further when you get back." I calmly stood up, gave a formal bow, and spoke in a gentle yet distant tone. "My husband, you are too kind. Since my younger sister wishes to step down, let it be as she wishes. I am capable of shouldering the responsibilities of this household." An even more faint murmur rose from the crowd, a series of mocking remarks about the Duan family's traditions. I saw Duan Jingzhan's facial muscles twitch violently. He valued his reputation above all else. Yet now, in full view of everyone, his own woman had humiliated him. That kind of rage was enough to burn away his last shred of sanity. Pei Yunyao slumped to the ground, her eyes filled with bewilderment. She thought she was playing a move to win him back, But little did she know that she had pushed him into the abyss with her own hands. This is exactly what I want. Right here, in the heart of the action. I'll personally tear away the veil covering the rotten truth of the Duan family. Duan Jingzhan. Isn't your reputation what you value most? Then I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life living under the scorn of others. And I, amidst this garden full of scorn, still stand tall. Pei Yun Yao. This is merely the first wound. What comes next is the nightmare that truly belongs to you. After the flower viewing banquet, the Duan family's world came crashing down. Because of his outburst at the banquet that day, Duan Jingzhan was impeached in the imperial court by the censor general for having an immoral family upbringing. His colleagues, who had usually treated him as a close friend, now went out of their way to avoid him, afraid of being tainted by his bad luck. Upon returning to his residence, he took out all his anger on Pei Yun Yao. That night, Pei Yun Yao was beaten nearly to death. The affection she had once enjoyed was as fleeting as a mirage. In the face of the reality of her stalled political career, it proved as fragile as a bubble. I watched the scene unfold with a cold detachment, without intervening. When a person's eyes are blinded by desire, even if they find themselves in the depths of an abyss, they will still believe it is the path to heaven. And at that moment, Pei Yun Yao was struggling in that very abyss, completely unaware of it. Miss. The second young lady has been kneeling in the Buddhist hall for 2 days now, Qinghe said softly as she held out a bowl of medicine. She says she wants to see you. I was sitting at my desk, sketching a painting titled Plum Blossoms in the Cold. In the painting, the plum blossoms stand defiant against the frost and snow, cold and aloof just like my state of mind right now. Without looking up, I said calmly, she wants to see me. She just wants me to intercede on her behalf. Go tell her that, in my current condition, I can't withstand the cold there. Tell her to reflect on her actions. Pei Yunyao's breakdown came much sooner than I had expected. 3 days later, late one stormy night with thunder and lightning, Pei Yunyao suddenly burst into my room. Her once elegant and beautiful clothes were now in tatters. Her hair hung in disarray against her pale cheeks, and her eyes no longer held the greed they once did. Instead, they were filled with a madness bordering on despair. Sister, you lied to me. She stumbled over to my bed, her voice shrill as a ghost's. You said that if I just apologized, he'd change his mind. But look at him now. He's going to send me off to the estate and force me to marry some old widower. I put down the book I was holding and looked at her calmly. All I said at the time was that this was the only way to clear his name. As for how he chooses to deal with you, that's his business. What does it have to do with me? You did this on purpose. She lunged at me, trying to grab me by the throat. But Qinghe, who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion, pushed her away. She collapsed onto the ground, letting out a shrill laugh. I get it now. You never intended to let me have a good life. You hate me for stealing your husband. You hate me. I hate you. I looked at her with contempt, as if she were a pathetic plaything. Yun Yao, don't you get it by now? I've never cared about him, and I've certainly never cared about you. Duan Jingzhan is nothing more than a man blinded by greed. And you're nothing more than a tool he used to test my limits. Now that the tool is broken, of course he's going to discard it. Pei Yunyao froze. The madness in her eyes faded, replaced by endless fear. It seemed as if, for the first time, she truly understood what her place in this family really was. But he clearly said before that. What did he say? I leaned in close to her ear, my words as cold as ice. I've heard the sweet nothings he said, too, but what does he really love? Himself. As long as you're useless to him, you're just a rock by the roadside, easy to kick aside. She slumped to the ground, as if all her strength had been drained from her. Just then, a commotion of footsteps could be heard outside the door. Duan Jingzhan, accompanied by several servants, stormed in with a menacing air. He looked down at Pei Yunyao lying on the floor. His eyes held not a shred of pity, only boundless loathing. Get back to your courtyard. Starting today, you're not allowed to take a single step outside without my permission. He roared. Then his gaze turned to me, and the expression on his face the moment he saw me suddenly took on an extremely twisted sense of hope. Yunshu, I was wrong. The manor can't do without you. I'll hand the role of house steward back to you. I looked at him, feeling nothing at all. In my previous life, I had humbly begged for this very moment, even if it meant just a single glance back at me. But now, as he stood before me, truly groveling, I felt nothing but disgust. My lord, I no longer have the strength to bear the burden of this turmoil in the household, I said in a calm tone, my eyes clear. My health has always been frail, and now I cannot endure even the slightest upheaval. I renounce my authority as housekeeper. You. Duan Jingzhan hadn't expected me to refuse so flatly. His face instantly turned ashen. Are you going to just stand by and watch the Duan family estate be ruined by that slut? The mansion is ruined at worst. We'll just move somewhere else. I turned away, facing away from him. If you truly want to save the Duan mansion, my husband, you should think carefully about who brought her into this house in the first place, and who, for the sake of a moment's novelty, threw away what matters most. Dignity. Duan Jingzhan's fists clenched so tightly they cracked. He stared intently at my back, then finally slammed the door shut and stormed out. It was late at night, and the wind was howling more and more piercingly. Pei Yunyao was dragged out by the servants, and her heart-wrenching screams echoed through the rainy night, sounding particularly jarring. Qinghe walked over to me and whispered, Miss, the second young lady brought this upon herself, but are you really not going to take over the management of the estate? Take over? Why would I take over? I walked to the window and looked out at the courtyard in the pouring rain, my gaze as cold and hard as iron. I don't want power over this mansion, I want to watch as it all falls apart, piece by piece. Duan Jingzhan, the prestige and reputation you crave, I will strip them away from you. One by one, with my own hands. This downpour came at just the right time. It cannot wash away the sins that once plagued this mansion, but it is enough to let this rotten game of chess rot completely on the board. I returned to bed and closed my eyes, even as thunder rumbled outside the window. I slept soundly, for I knew that the Pei Yunshu who had once been blinded by love had vanished completely, for the rest of my days. Duan Jingzhan's remorse and despair would be the best remedy for me in this lifetime. The thunderclap that shook the imperial court finally struck with full force on a morning after a heavy rain had just cleared, due to his lax management of his household and the chaos caused by his concubines. Coupled with 3 consecutive memorials of impeachment from the censorate accusing Duan Jingzhan of accounting irregularities and factionalism during his tenure, the emperor flew into a rage during the morning court session. In full view of everyone, he stripped Duan of his position at the Ministry of Works, demoted him to a low-ranking, unranked clerk, and ordered him to remain under house arrest to reflect on his mistakes. From a rising star in the capital whom everyone envied to a disgraced figure whom everyone sought to avoid, Duan Jingzhan's political career, which he had painstakingly planned for many years, vanished completely in the space of just a few days. In the main hall, the sycophantic courtiers of yesteryear had vanished without a trace, and even the servants who had served the family for years had begun secretly plotting their own ways out. This once glorious and strictly regulated nobleman's residence now resembled a great tree hollowed out from within by termites. It would collapse with a thunderous crash at the slightest push. I sat quietly on the soft couch by the window, gazing at the divorce agreement I had long since drafted. As my fingertips traced the slightly rough edges of the Xian paper, I felt a sense of calm and composure unlike anything I had ever experienced before. The door was flung open with a loud, jarring crash, and Duan Jingzhan burst in. Looking disheveled and reeking of alcohol, his eyes, which had always exuded an air of haughty superiority and strategic acumen, were now bloodshot, his eye sockets sunken, and his complexion a pale, ashen gray. His official cap was nowhere to be seen. His jet-black hair hung in disarray over his shoulders, and his brocaded robe was caked with mud and grime. Where was even a trace of the young, handsome, and refined figure he had once been in the capital? Yunshu, save me! You must save me! He rushed over to my bedside in a few strides, clutching the hem of my skirt so tightly with both hands that he nearly tore the fine silk. His voice was hoarse, as if it had been harshly scraped by gravel. The Pei family. Your father is a high-ranking minister in the current administration and commands great prestige among the civil officials. As long as he's willing to put in a good word for me before His Majesty. As long as the Pei family is willing to step in and lend a hand, I still have a chance to turn this around. His Majesty is merely acting out of anger. As long as someone is willing to vouch for me, I'm certain I can be reinstated to my former post. I looked down at him from above. My eyes betraying neither anger nor the flamboyance of vengeance fulfilled, but only a cold, detached indifference that seemed to see right through everything. I slowly reached out my hand and, one by one, pried apart the fingers that were clenched tightly around the hem of my skirt. Me movements elegant yet resolute. My lord, you're being foolish. I picked up a handkerchief lying nearby and calmly wiped my hands. My tone as matter-of-fact as if I were discussing today's weather. Father has lived a life of integrity and honesty. He has always strictly adhered to his duties in the court and has never participated in any factionalism or self-serving schemes. Now that His Majesty's decision is final, it is true that you have not managed the household strictly. And it is true that there are doubts about the accounts, but how could Father possibly risk offending the imperial authority and tarnishing the reputation of the entire Pei family for the sake of a disgraced official whose character is in question and who has been personally reprimanded by His Majesty? Tai. Lax household management. Unclear accounts. Duan Jingzhan seemed to have been struck where it hurt most. He sprang to his feet and shouted hysterically, completely beside himself. That's all the work of that slut Pei Yunyao. She's the one who lined her own pockets. She's the one who brought shame upon me in front of outsiders and ruined my reputation. Yun Shu. She's the one who ruined me. I'm innocent. Is that so? I let out a cold laugh and slowly pushed the divorce decree on the desk toward him. But wasn't it you, my husband, who once treated her like a treasure and brought her into this mansion, disregarding all the rules? If you hadn't been so enamored with her flattery, if you hadn't deliberately indulged her to maintain balance within the inner quarters, how could Shay, helpless concubine's daughter with no one to rely on, have stirred up such a huge storm in the Duan household? You keep saying she's the one who ruined you, but isn't it really your own greed and selfishness that have ruined you? Duan Jingzhan's gaze followed my finger and finally settled on the 3 large characters written in thick black ink. Divorce agreement. He was struck as if by lightning, and his face instantly turned as pale as paper. He pointed at the paper with a trembling finger. His eyes filled with shock and disbelief, his voice rising a few notches. You want a divorce from me? At a time like this? Pei Yunshu. We were once husband and wife. At the most difficult time for the Duan family, when I was at my lowest, you actually want to abandon me. Where is your gentleness and virtue? Where have your 3 obediences and 4 virtues gone? A husband and wife. I stood up, meeting his gazia mix of shock and anger, and straightened my back, enunciating each word clearly. Duan Jingzhan. At this point, why do you still feel the need to restrain me with these high-sounding words? You married me simply because you were after the Pei family's power and influence, and needed a dignified, proper facade to pave the way for you. You pamper Pei Yunyao simply to satisfy your selfish vanity. You've never truly loved anyone. The only things you've ever loved are your own future, your own interests, and your own reputation. He opened his mouth, as if to speak up in protest, as if to use those old, heartfelt lies to cover up the truth. But when his gaze met my eyes cold as ice, devoid of even a shred of emotion, all his words seemed to get stuck in his throat, and he couldn't utter a single syllable. He probably never expected that Pei Yunshu woman whose eyes had once been filled with nothing but him, who would weep in secret for hours over a single word he spoke, could see through his despicable intentions so clearly and with such resolute determination. Yun Shu, I know I've neglected you in the past. It was a moment of foolishness on my part. One was blinded by others. He took a deep breath, his voice suddenly softening, a faint glimmer of tears even welling up in his eyes as he reached out once more to tug at my sleeve, his tone almost pleading. That vile woman is now completely ruined. Before long, she'll be driven out of the mansion with a beating and sent to the most remote estate to fend for herself. From now on, you'll be the only mistress of this mansion. I swear that for the rest of my life. I'll make it up to you tenfold and never let you suffer the slightest injustice again. Please take back this divorce decree, won't you? Let's start over with husband and wife united in heart. We'll surely restore the Duan family to its former glory. I stepped back to the side, ruthlessly dodging his touch. Watching him grovel and beg for mercy like that, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. There was a time when I, too, had longed for his tenderness. But now it seems that his so-called deep affection and remorse are nothing more than a stopgap measure, a desperate attempt to cling to one last foothold when he has nowhere else to turn. Compensation. A fresh start. I looked at him, a hint of pity in my voice. Duan Jingzhan. It's too late. Do you think you lost simply because of Pei Yunyao's ignorance? To be perfectly honest, the evidence of Pei Yunyao's tampering with the accounts, as well as the irrefutable proof of your collusion with officials from other provinces and the bribes you've accepted over the years, has long been meticulously compiled by my people and delivered to the censorate. Do you think she's the one who brought this upon you? No, it was your own greed, combined with my cold indifference, that pushed you step by step into the abyss. Duan Jingzhan's eyes suddenly widened, and deep within them, utter terror and trembling came to the surface. Having lived to this day, he had always prided himself on his exceptional intelligence and his ability to manipulate people at will, yet he never could have imagined that this scheme which had brought about his downfall and ruined his reputation had actually been meticulously orchestrated behind the scenes, stroke by stroke, by his legitimate wife, whom he had always looked down upon and considered weak and easy to bully. It's you. It's actually you. His body jerked violently, and he nearly toppled onto the hard tile floor. His voice trembled uncontrollably, filled with endless bitterness and despair. Pei Yunshu, why are you so cruel? Why did you destroy everything I had with your own hands? I didn't destroy you, I simply returned to you, exactly as you had inflicted it on others. All the pain and scheming you once inflicted on others. I looked down at him from above, my eyes filled with a clarity and sense of relief as if the clouds had parted to reveal the sun. Just then, a steady, rhythmic sound of footsteps came from outside the door. Several of my older brothers from the Pei family had been waiting there for quite some time, accompanied by burly bodyguards. My eldest brother strode into the room, shot Duan Jingzhan a cold glance, and immediately tossed a confession bearing the thumbprints of the stewards from each branch of the family onto the table. Duan Jingzhan looked at the Pei family members standing guard outside the door, then at the irrefutable evidence before him which, if he did not sign, would send him straight to the Zhongrenfu prison. The light in his eyes finally faded completely. He slumped in his chair, trembling as he picked up the brush which felt as heavy as 1,000 jin and heavily scrawled his name on the divorce decree, pressing a blood-red fingerprint beneath it. In that instant, it was as if all his vitality and spirit had been drained from him. His entire body went limp, leaving him looking as forlorn as a beggar on the street. I put away my copy of the divorce papers, didn't even spare him a single glance, and turned to stride out the door. As she stepped out of the main hall and passed through the side gate of the front courtyard, she happened to see two maidservants dragging Pei Yunya, who looked gaunt and deranged, out of the compound. Her fine brocade robes had long since been stripped from her and replaced with coarse hemp garments. Her hair was disheveled, and she was still muttering incoherently. I am the matriarch of the Duan household. Jingzhan loves me. I am the future lady of imperial decree. Yet the only response she received was the maid's merciless shoving and the desolate, remote estate in the distance that awaited her. What she had schemed so cunningly to snatch from my hands had ultimately become a living tomb that swallowed her whole. As for me, surrounded by the members of the Pei family, I slowly walked out through the vermilion gate of the Duan residence. The sky had now cleared completely, as blue as if washed clean, and the warm sunlight bathed me, dispelling the chill that had lingered in my heart for many days. I paused and looked back, taking one last glance at that grand yet thoroughly decayed mansion. Its very foundations rotted away, and let out a long sigh. The invisible shackles that had confined me for so many years, suffocating me, finally vanished without a trace at that very moment. I turned around, never looking back, and with a light step, I walked toward my own vast and free new life, carried by the gentle spring breeze.